Welcome everyone to our core devs call number 55, UTC 0000. Middle of the night for so many people joining us today. I'm in Toronto and it's just about 7:02 p.m. We have a number of things to cover today. Hopefully we are able to go through them quickly, but as well, I'm hoping we can leave this meeting really meeting all our objectives. We are going to be having a technical discussion first from Luca and Irene on optimistic snap deal. Luca, Irene, we've already agreed that you'd have 5 minutes to quickly run us through that. And then Alex North will take another 20 minutes, hopefully less, to discuss PIP 47 and market cron risks and mitigations. I am not sure if Vic is on the call, and if he has updates, he would also provide that for 56, but Caitlin would also give us the governance updates. We will close today, we'll close today discussing NV19 scope and timeline planning, as well as Jennifer giving us very quick updates on NV18, just a brief update as to timeline. So we do have a lot of things to cover, and with that, I'll be handing that over to Luca. And I think Irene, I'm not sure who will be presenting today. Over
I'm presenting.
Luca.
I'm presenting. Thank you.
Okay.
So let me start so that I can stay in the 5 minutes. Irene and I open a discussion, the discussion 645, to present the idea of optimistic snap deals. What is that? It's basically a variation of the protocol that gives a trade-off between SLA guarantee and computation overhead. Why did we get into that? So snap deals was introduced last year. It's great because it allows data to be injected into existing CC sector, but the drawback of the protocol is like snap deal cost is really significant on the storage provider side, and we will see why. So with this idea, we just want to give an opportunity to have, let's say, a low-cost alternative for the storage provider to perform snap deals at a cost which is not having a priori guarantee that the data is stored into the sector. This is not something that we cannot check, but as you will see in a second, it has some sort of additional cost for the client. So first of all, why Snapdeal is expensive? It's expensive because we used SHA-256 based COMD. And on the positive side, this commitment is really cheap for the client to compute and verify. Next slide, please. But on the negative side, it's really expensive for the storage provider to prove in the SNARK for the extractor of the commitment itself. So the idea of optimistic, next slide, please, is to ask the storage provider to prove snap deals not using the SHA-based commit, but using the Poseidon-based COMD. Why? Because on the storage provider side, this translates into a 230x cheaper proofs for the snap deal proof overall. And the drawback is that the client, if the client needs to check this commitment, it would spend 100x more than the SHA-based COMD. The positive thing is that depending on the SLA guarantee that the client is willing to accept, this computation is not mandatory. Next, please. So how does the protocol works? Basically, the storage provider submits both the SHA commitment and the Poseidon commitment on chain, and then snaps the data into a CC sector, proving the snap using only the Poseidon commit. And basically, that's it if everything goes smoothly. And at the later point, when a client retrieves or attempts to retrieve the data, if he notices some inconsistency, then he can basically submit a fraud proof at a small fee and ask the storage provider to provide the standard snap deal proof. And if the storage provider does not do so, basically it's slashed. Next, please. So what does the former one, please? Okay. What does optimistic mean? So we said that the main drawback of this protocol is that we do not have a priori guarantee that the data is inside the sector, but what if one wants to actually verify that this is the case? So you have two options. The first option is the client checks the Poseidon commitment, and if it's not matching, he sends a fraud proof. And this can happen both at deal making and afterwards at any point in time throughout the deal duration. The second option is to submit a fraud proof right away and asking the storage provider to provide a standard snap deal proof. These two options are also viable from third parties, so not only for the client or the data owner. Next. To wrap up, optimistic snap deals adds on the current protocol flexibility on the client side that now can trade off SLA guarantee and computation. So if the client trusts the provider, there is no overhead for the client and 230x cost saving for the provider. If the client does not really trust the provider, he can either go with standard snap deals or check the Poseidon commit or submit the fraud proof. And if a third entity wants to audit the whole process, they can actually either check the Poseidon commit or submit a fraud proof, as the client can do. This is it on my side. All comments and suggestions are welcome in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there quick questions that are absolutely important now? Yes, Stephen. You're muted, Stephen.
Okay, and I have one question here. So yeah, if there is a collusion between the client and the the storage provider, so yeah, this can be if the proof is false. So can this be verified?
Yeah, so there are two things here. First, the storage hardness is not put at risk, like consensus is not at risk, even if the data is faked into the sector. And second, as I said, any third entity can actually check if the data is actually inside the sector or not by either running a fraud proof or checking the commitment, the Poseidon commitment at a higher cost than the SHA commitment, of course.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, if we do this, if we want to check all the data proof, how about the cost? So I mean, this is just like what we do for the window post, right?
Yeah, it's basically something that could be similar to window post. We are kind of thinking about some sort of incentives to make this auditing being, let's say, profitable and not and being shared among many different entities.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm thinking about the cost. If the cost is high, so
that's why I'm saying eventually incentives or this kind of things. I mean, the cost is high, but if you submit a fraud proof, like asking the storage provider to submit a regular snap deal proof, this is not really high for the client. It's just high for the storage provider itself. Right. So you can always pay a small fee and force the storage provider to provide a regular proof.
So yeah, what I'm thinking. Is that for regular deals, it will be quite okay. Yeah, but for the verified deals, I'm thinking about the security because there could be collusion.
I understand.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. I will also be sharing the FIP draft or the discussion thread. You can add your comments as well after the call or continue the conversation async. Handing it over now to Alex.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here and listening. So I got two things. First thing, the Filecoin network has this system, this function called cron, which we call cron, which executes some actor code at the end of every tip set evaluation. That is intended to perform system level processing. The code is executed not on behalf of any one user, and in particular, this means no one's paying the gas costs for this work. We can compute, we can track how many gas units are used, but there is no price for these gas units, and no one pays for it. This was could be viewed as either a really nice feature or as a design shortcut. It's sort of a bit of both. In some ways, here it was used as a pragmatic tool to get us some important functionality around the network launch. But we're approaching the point where we need to find better ways to do some of those things. So right now, cron is using, doing 3 times more work than the entire target work to validate a tip-set. So our tip-sets are taking 4 times longer than we expect them to take, because cron is responsible for 75% of it. This is perhaps 30 times what we think would be a good target for how much work cron should do, which would be sort of 10% of a tip-set evaluation at most. So this directly affects our block validation times, and so block validation times are hardware dependent, and so these times depend on the hardware that are running. But while we're sort of targeting a 2.5 second average tip-set validation time, we're actually seeing 8 seconds as a median, and then much larger numbers for higher quantiles. This matters because long block evaluation time affects the chain quality. So if this gets too long, then some miners will be unable to compute their tip-set in time to produce a block to go on top of that tip-set. This probably, this would affect smaller operations more than larger operations, because smaller operations win blocks much less frequently. So when this happens to them, they will lose a larger share of their income. They're also less likely to have super expensive and redundant hardware to make sure they get these opportunities. It's also bad for decentralization for similar reasons. It raises the minimum hardware requirements and network requirements to be a fully validating node and to keep up with the chain. It particularly raises the cost of syncing the chain if one falls behind the current tip-set and needs to catch up. The reason it's possible to catch up is because block validation takes much less than 30 seconds. The closer that block validation takes to 30 seconds, the longer it takes to catch up if one falls behind, tens or hundreds of epochs, or is catching up from a snapshot, daily snapshot or something when syncing a new chain. So basically, this is if it gets worse, is a very serious problem. We're currently at the point where it's uncomfortable, but we don't need to cause an emergency to fix it, so long as we fix it soon. Next slide, please. So happily, the major use of this cron turned out to be a very simple thing that we can easily identify, and with one fix we can make a large amount of the problem go away. And that is that the built-in market actor is doing most of this work, doing deal maintenance. And the built-in market actor today performs a little operation on every active deal every 24 hours. The main operation it performs is transfer an incremental payment from the client to the provider. But it will also checks for terminated sectors and things like that. Well, it does the cleanup work after a sector is terminated ahead of time. This is a fundamentally unscalable design, but was a compromise at network launch to get things going. This design cannot keep working if the number of deals scales much larger. And right now, the reason this has sort of come up on us, everything I've said was sort of known for a long time, but the reason this has come up quickly is because there's been huge advances in the rate of deal growth over the past 6 to 12 months, and that has turned out to be the thing that's causing this problem. So it sort of crept up on us faster than was expected. Yeah, so the built-in market here is doing a thing that is not necessary for a market to do, this incremental deal payment. It's a nice feature, but it's not by any means a necessary part of how Filecoin works. And so this cron execution, anything that cron does can be looked at as a subsidy. All participants in the network, all validating nodes, are doing some work, doing some execution work that no one is paying for. And in some cases, when that subsidy is towards a network good, like it's checking faults, checking for missed window posts or something like that, then we think that's a somewhat reasonable thing to do. But in this case, this is not an activity that should be subsidized at all. And in the long term, I'm very keen, and I think some others are, that other people will build other market actors that can do a better job than the built-in storage market actor in many different dimensions. But those user program markets won't have cron. There's no way we're going to let cron call untrusted code, including anything written by outside of a network upgrade. And so this is sort of an unfair advantage that the built-in market actor has, which will be a slight impediment to user markets in competing on functionality. So two fixes: short-term fix, which I guess is the main thing to discuss today. Our short-term fix here is we can increase the maintenance interval from 1 day to 30 days to approximately divide this problem by 30, and that will buy us enough time. That'll probably be good for the rest of this year, depending on deal growth rates. And buy us time to do a more permanent fix. And so I recommend, and I've done this work with Kubuksu and Zenground. We recommend tidying network version 19 for this short-term fix, and I've already written the code for it. It's ready. The things that this needs to do to get into network version 19 is for me to write a FIP, and for that FIP to go through governance. That FIP will only focus on this, increasing the interval to 30 days. But then the second thing I think we should do after that is another FIP, which removes automatic deal maintenance from the built-in market actor entirely, and puts it on the same sort of the same playing field that non-built-in market actors would be, which is that they'll require some kind of external message to trigger the actual transfer of funds for a deal, which would most likely come from whoever's going to receive those funds after the deal completes. That's my spiel. Any questions?
I can't see any hand up. Do you want to proceed with the next one?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so if no questions, expect a FIP in the next few days for this, which will be very simple. It'll just be multiplying a constant. Well, it's slightly more than that, but have the effect of doing that. Okay, thank you. Another topic. So FIP 47, this is a FIP that was proposed last year sometime, approved and implemented, but not yet activated in the network. Was scheduled for activation in network version 19. This establishes a mechanism to be used in case we discover a vulnerability in our proof of replication code, and establishes a sort of the FIP has two purposes. One is to communicate to network participants what we would do in case that this happens, so they can understand the risk to their operation, and either plan for or cost in or mitigate the risk that if this happens, this is the kind of policy that we would adopt. And then in order to make that policy possible to implement, it established an on-chain schedule for all of the active sectors that could be used to trigger their forced resealing or termination in the event that we discover this flaw. So like I say, this was accepted. It was motivated by desire to increase the maximum sector expiration, time, so that people can make an upfront commitment to a very long period sector. Anyway, so it was all ready to go, so everything was unblocked. But we've since had a better idea. We in fact had two rounds of better ideas. So I wrote this slide a week ago, expecting to explain our first better idea. But then we've since had another better idea, which is we realized we actually don't need to do anything. So the goal here is for us to have an orderly, be able to institute an orderly forced resealing of all sectors in the network over some time period. We couldn't figure out how to do that without recording that schedule in state last year. We've since figured out how we can do it without any changes to state. And so it was the fact that we need to record this in state, which is what prompted us to need to do work now. But realizing that we can do it without recording anything in state means we can postpone some of this work. So I have not yet written up, I've written like a 4-sentence description of what the new scheme is, and we should convince ourselves that this scheme will in fact work. But the summary is that Kuba and I will write a much larger, a more fuller description of what this scheme should be, and probably attached to a new FIP, which will replace FIP 47. And sorry, next slide, please. And from here, I think right now, this would definitely be up for discussion. I think right now my recommendation is that we would actually implement this new scheme, including all the code that would do the scheduled expiration, but just set parameters that mean that it's not doing anything. So you set the parameter for like what epoch should it start forcing terminations to be infinitely far in the future, so that it's not doing anything. And later on, if we discover a flaw, all we do is pull this constant back to be when we want the schedule to start. And that means we can write the code, we can test it, and then in the event that we do need to activate it, it's one less thing we need to do in some critical rushed period when we're trying to react to a network that's in trouble. But it's possible for us to postpone all that work as long as we're confident that it can be done. So in summary, I recommend that we do not activate FIP47 in the network and expect to write a new FIP to replace it. I don't think this will be a nice first time for this particular governance flow. The core devs deciding not to activate the network, that's totally up to us. We can just decide, hey, let's not ship this code this time. Retracting the already accepted FIP is a different thing, but there's no particular rush on that at the moment. Okay, I didn't see what was going past in the comments, but are there any questions?
A couple of comments going on in the chat box. I think there is one from Dip around any estimates on the magnitude of active deals we can support before cron is much more likely to run out of time.
I think we resolve that for right now. We can take it offline.
Okay.
Yeah,
agreed. Thank you, Kuba.
It's hard to give an actual number, but we feel like if the current growth rate continues for 2 months and then we fix it, we'll probably be okay.
Thank you.
I think that great. There is, I think Jennifer also asked a couple of questions around what's the proposed resealing period, any mitigation in case where a good proportion of SPs refuse to upgrade. Yeah.
So the default period right now that happens anyway because of our limited sector lifetimes is 1.5 years. I think it's a reasonable default to expect, but the actual schedule or need is impossible to say until we understand what the problem is and what the risk was and what the flaw in POREP is and how critical that is. So we would certainly, as a core devs group, reserve the right to set a schedule based on the actual incident that's happened, to propose that to the network. This change doesn't do anything to the fact that it's possible for SPs as a group to refuse to accept an upgrade. That was always possible in the first time as well. In any case, we need to ship a network upgrade with a new proof and disallowing the old proof and triggering this forced refresh mechanism. That was always the case. This doesn't change that. So I don't have an answer.
So I do agree. Just to make sure I understand. So we're proposing to introduce the resale period parameter to the network and having it set to default 1.5 years first, and then we can react later on. We'll figure out a better number once it's happened.
We can probably avoid setting the 540-day parameter in code at all. Okay. We can probably set it to 0.
Okay.
Now to retain.
Gotcha.
More obviously retain discretion.
Any other question for Alex?
I do want to, in case anyone hasn't following up in the FIP discussion, I do want to say thank you to Zen, Alex, and Kuba, everyone who has spending extra time into reviewing what's the best approach for POREP security, because spent a lot of effort last year to mitigate the risk, potential risk introducing by SDM, because it's proposing extending the sector lifetime. We come up with a little bit complicated solution, and we are time pressured, and the fact that now we're taking the time review the design, which is avoiding protocol complexity without being necessary. I think that's really nice. I just want to say thank you to the CryptoNet Lab team to spending this time. And from an implementer perspective, we don't have to do any sector migration in the network upgrade. I'm extremely happy about that because our node has some challenges a Shark upgrade. So thank you.
Awesome. Vic, I have you on today. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak on 56. I know that Caitlin comes next to just talk about like the governance aspect to it, but I'll let you say something.
No, thanks, Lucky. I think Caitlin will take the bulk of the time on governance regarding this FIP, but I just wanted to provide a quick update from the crypto economics perspective regarding changes in the latest PR. So the kind of summary is authors of the, it's not good. The short summary that authors of the FIP have proposed a version that we are comfortable with introducing into last call. The key difference and update is that this sector duration multiplier will have a maximum of 2x multiplier on your power for the maximum sector commitment of 5 years. There are a myriad of factors that kind of influence that decision. A good summary of that analysis can be found here. But the short answer is we looked at Crypto Econ Lab looked at a variety of different scenarios with regards to storage provider response to the policy. And from a perspective of introducing something positive to the network with kind of less downside risk, that we concluded that a sector duration multiplier that was lower in slope and a little bit softer of a policy to kind of introduce to the network would be better from a risk perspective, as well as from a perspective of also including the kind of opinions and sentiments of storage providers given the current economic climate. I would encourage everyone to read the document linked in the chat, which is also public, which has been made public, to have a better sense of exactly why in the modeling analysis that kind of went into this decision. But overall, the TLDR is we are proposing a softer slope, which is kind of a less kind of, I don't want to say less aggressive than the ones that were previously kind of proposed. And I just want to be like very clear as to what risks that we kind of isolated. In the case where you have a higher multiplier, there's potentially a higher risk of slowed raw byte, of a larger decrease in raw byte power, coupled with maybe potentially higher termination incentives from storage providers. Those are kind of modeled out in the document shared. But given, let's say, more extreme responses to a multiplier in which you have a lower amount of storage committed to the network at higher amounts of power, given like a maximum multiplier, there are potential scenarios in which that could be harmful to the network. Given that, we have proposed a version of the policy that kind of mitigates those risks while still providing some incentive for longer commitments, but not to the extent that there is a potential for both slowed terminations and or slowed onboarding on the network and decreased capacity. I'm happy to answer questions about this further, but I just, this is kind of the version of the policy that authors think is better for the network, given the current status of the network now. And I think Caitlin will talk a little bit more about governance going forward as we look to entering last call.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. Yeah, so as we all know, governance has been a huge boondoggle on this FIP, and we both know that there's a very clear timing requirement here, but also don't want to rush any decision making. So really, thank you for your patience over the last couple of weeks. I've met extensively with the storage provider working group teams, the Crypto Econ Lab team, who I'm in person with right now, and also run a couple of working group sessions within the foundation. And we have, as of last night, pretty unanimous consent about a sort of hybrid last call pathway forward, which will allow us to move forward in sort of a community-minded way while still achieving explicit consent as to whether or not SDM will be accepted and is ready for implementation in NV19. So again, we're moving really fast in order to get this in place in time. And I'm hoping to have a full process doc that is simple, clear, easy to understand, available tomorrow. This will be public, not just for core devs, but for everyone. If you'd like to see all of the planning and sort of decision matrices that went into this, I'm happy to share those with you privately. Just send me a Slack DM. But what we're effectively looking to do is our standard 2-week last call period, gathering information and sort of preparing final documentation about pros and cons and major community discussion points around FIP, and then asking for soft consensus amongst core devs. This is not going to be a hard vote, hopefully, if we can avoid it. And it will not be sort of formalized through Filecoin, which was something that no one was really interested in sort of relaunching. But happy to sort of explain more, especially once we're able to get some written materials out for everyone. Jennifer is asking, how will soft consensus work? In this sense, it's the same way we always do, where we have a discussion amongst ourselves. We see if we can reach an endpoint. If we cannot, and there is significant dissension about what we ought to do from about half of the group, we will levy a hard vote of yeas and nays with the option to abstain. Again, we really boiled the ocean on this and have looked at all different types of angles for moving forward with the SDM proposal. I really feel pretty confident this is the best way forward. I know some core devs are really opposed to the idea of having to weigh in that directly on governance challenges, but in this case, we're really asking for you to do so. It's pretty lightweight change. It's pretty similar to what we've done before. It's just formalizing that role a little bit more. And it is really, for now, just in the context of SDM. So again, we don't have a ton of time and we're still writing up final documentation to share with everyone. Happy to answer any other top of mind questions. And also happy, since again, we don't have a ton of time this evening, to schedule some open office hours tomorrow, which I'm also happy to record if you want to talk through some of the decision making or issues that you may want to flag. All right, and it looks like CX's comment is about the actual parameters. Jenny, what is the start date of last call? Great question. I know our friend Vic wants it to be tomorrow. I think that's too soon, but I think we can start as soon as Monday, using tomorrow to sort of socialize a plan, make sure there are no major flags from anyone. But again, we have consensus from within the entire foundation, the SP working groups, CEL, Filecoin Plus team also has taken a look at this proposal. And so hopefully on Monday, that would also put us in line with including SDM if accepted in the NV19 timeline as it is currently scoped. We'll talk about that in a second. Of course, the timeline is not set, but if we are looking at an upgrade in April and the FIP is accepted, it would be possible to get it in time.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there additional questions on top of your head that you want to ask? Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. Obviously, more updates will be coming regarding, the next steps and moving forward. So expect those soon. Jennifer, are you ready for NV18 updates? Over to you then.
This is going to be quick. Next slide. There's a dude shouting out the Pi Day there. So just want to quickly align with the rest of the core dev. The network NV18 Hugo upgrade, which is also the FEM launch, that brings user programmability to the Filecoin network for the first time. We have a mainnet upgrade date scheduled on March the 14th, 3:14 p.m. UTC. We're calling it a Pi Day for obvious reasons. For those who are wondering why so many 314, it's because the Filecoin mainnet chain ID on Ethereum is actually 314. It's kind of cute in my opinion. So that's why we're having this upgrade date. So far, Lotus has released our final release to support this network upgrade. Since we have performed the upgrade on hyperspace calibration, things are doing well. I have a quick matrix showing up there, which is so far the hyperspace testnet started around January the 16th, and we have 36,000 contract deployed. So there's a lot of testing. We caught a lot of bugs, but like so far we feel like we're ready for this big launch. It's been a long time like coming. So yeah, March the 14th That's that. I think both Venus and Forest is going to join in this network upgrade as well. So I don't know if Stephen, you want to share any Venus release update, but that's it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. From the Venus side, we're currently running on the calibration network, and yeah, it's running. I think very well, and we're comparing with Notice. We found that the block verification time is is a bit longer than before, but okay, so this should be result from the if EVM introduced. Okay, so it will have higher requirements about the hardware for nodes. Yeah, but I think it's fine. Now it will take about a few seconds more, and a few seconds. And every other all other functions are fine. And so will be available for the mainnet. And we will have a release available very soon.
Thank you, Stephen. I just want to quickly call out one last thing. And the aim for at least Lotus as a client implementation, we try to provide full compatibility with the EVM ecosystem. So we do have 1-to-1 mapping of the most popular, the ETH RPC API standard. We have 1-to-1 mapping in Lotus with Filecoin API. And if you're from the Ethereum ecosystem, you're used to Remix or MetaMask, any tooling that you have should just working fine with the Lotus node on Filecoin network. So I hope this is a good news for developers and can make your life building on Filecoin easier. So super looking forward to that.
Yeah. Okay. From the and on the Vela side is the same. Okay. Yeah, we will make all the APIs completable. Yeah. To Ethereum, it's the same.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Over to you, Caitlin, for NV19.
If I had known that Jennifer was, if I had known Jennifer was going to include GIFs, I would have really made this a little flashier and more fun. Please note this as preliminary because it is preliminary. It is tentative and subject to change. And if you have significant suggestions, as always, we capture those in the discussion chat in the core devs repo on GitHub. But right now, this list should look very familiar to you all. These are the proposed FIPS that we've really been talking around for this upgrade for the last couple of months. It includes the updated and revised version of the POREP security policy that Alex presented, as well as the pending built-in market cron risk mitigation draft. We're also going to include, if possible, we may not be able to, given the tight timeline that we're potentially working on, the synthetic POREP updates that Luca presented to us today. And depending on acceptance, also the FIP56 sector duration multiplier, which has really driven a lot of this upgrade. This upgrade is already reminding me of the chocolate upgrade we did last year because it has lots of goodies and likely lots of enhancements that aren't rooted in FIPS as well. But right now, the timeline that we're looking on is quite tight. It's going to be April 4th update for calibration network and April 25th for mainnet. Again, part of this is dependent on the governance timeline, which we're hoping to finalize tomorrow and start some initial last calls next week. But it should give us till the end of the month to finalize those FIPS. As a final flag, I'm also working with Jennifer to help coordinate this network upgrade, and Lucky is going to be this upgrade's governance DRI. So starting, actually, we'll probably only have one more core devs meeting before the upgrade, but he will be sort of the go-to with all of the updates for FIPS as we finalize this list, and also reaching out and bugging everyone in your DMs to review FIP drafts, respond to edits, commit changes, and otherwise make sure everything is good to go before the actual upgrade itself. Any questions, flags, or ideas that you want to levy here? Otherwise, I can also quickly grab the link to the discussion thread in the core devs repo. there are no questions, I am going to get back to writing the governance proposal for SDM. So this sounds great.
Great.
One thing
Thank
about
you.
the scope is like particularly on the synthetic pole wrap. I just want to have a call here. It's like Lotus, we have been reviewing this proposal. Like we understand the motivation behind it, like what it's doing. However, based on the user feedback and our primary like analysis, like we're currently like not too sure this is the top priority or the most beneficial thing that we can do on the Lotus miner to bring a better experience or like help storage provider improving their like ceiling onboarding rate at the moment. So we are not certain that that should be a FIP that we prioritize for this upgrade or like in the next couple of weeks. I just want to share that.
Agreed. I just also quickly add to that the Lotus miner does not need to support synthetic pole wrap just for the FIP to be accepted. This could be an opportunity for alternate miners, Venus miner in particular, could potentially support it even if Lotus doesn't, and that would be nice.
Totally agree. From my understanding, synthetic pole wrap is gonna be more beneficial for like smaller like storage providers because like it's gonna save some like cost on hardware that they're gonna be spending. From what I got right now for a setup that is invested in 400K, there's gonna be a 2.5% cost reduction on their mining operation. And so for anyone that's like around that size, definitely see a benefit to them.
Thanks. Just looking through the chat if there are there additional questions? I think conversations going on there. Feel free to also engage and take your conversations in sync as well. But are there burning questions or concerns based on the presentations that we can take? We actually have some minutes to spare.
Yes, sorry, we have like 17 minutes left. I saw that Ayush earlier has a governance question that he wants to raise, so I'm wondering if we can get to that.
Yes, I know that Caitlin has a hard stop, but I think we can take that, given that we have some time left. Ayush?
If we're actively producing the comms for this, I can certainly wait till tomorrow. For what it's worth, and maybe this can shape the comms as well. My question is basically whether, as core devs, we're expected to vote factoring in the community sentiment, or just based on what we think about it. In the past, when I voted on or indicated my support or for a FIP, I've not factored in what the communities think. I just want that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's send kind of a philosophical tinge to it as well. To inadequately answer your question, I am going to say that your frame of reference should be choosing to support or reject the FIP based on what you think is best for the Filecoin network. So the materials that I will prepare for you will reflect community conversations, sentiment, really focusing on those sort of issues which are worth considering, really focused and seem to be in reflection of what the FIP is actually stating. And these are many of the ideas that should be very familiar to you all. These are the analyses and suggestions that have been floating around for months now. And it's going to be useful just in order to frame any resulting conversation that we may have with the group, and also make sure that the actual facilitation of the soft consensus, if there has to be an async component, since we probably don't want to have to wait another month in order to do this, that folks have the same materials to review going into that. My perspective is that your personal opinion, again, should reflect what is best for the Filecoin community. But the reason that we are passing this to core devs in the first place is because there are members of the Filecoin community who are fundamentally at odds in terms of either accepting or rejecting this. It is why our typical technical soft consensus does not work. And so therefore, it is perfectly reasonable for you to levy your own preferences, reasonable and well thought out as they are, and do so while realizing that you will not be able to account for every community member's preference. So kind of a diplomatic non-answer.
Ayush, do you have additional questions? Yeah.
Nope, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Awesome. Looks like for the first time since I started joining this course, we are actually, we have additional time left. There are other things, anything else based on the presentations we've had today that you'd like to also ask before we bring the meeting to a close? No. Okay, hoping to share the notes from the call. I will be sending that out sometime next week, as well as additional documentation and anything else that was referenced throughout the call today. Thank you so much for joining Core Devs 55, and I'm hoping to see you next month for Core Devs number 56. Good night, everyone from here.